22 minutes past 9, and we'd like to hear your perspective wherever you are, where you're listening from, wherever you're watching from. Please let us know your thoughts and also inform us on what's happening in and around your world, the conversations you're having, what's shaping your opinions. Reach out to us. We are on social media at Channel Africa 1. That's on X, on TikTok, on Instagram. We are also on YouTube on that handle and on Channel Africa on Facebook. So we continue with ongoings on a political front in South Africa. We're speaking about the government today requesting a delay in damages claims brought by families of victims of Apartheid-Era human rights abuses. This case involves survivors and relatives of those who experienced significant injustices, including the families of the Cradock Four. Joining us now is Zaid Kimmie, Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights, which supports these families. We speak with him about what this delay means for the ongoing pursuit of justice and, of course, healing. A very good evening to you, Zaid, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Is it a no-brainer to say, surely this must have been a disappointing development?
Well, the disappointing development was that the state, the president and the other applicants today argued that the court action should be delayed while the Commission of Inquiry completes its work. So it was disappointing to have that application, but I think we answered the question effectively in court today, and we are quietly confident that the court will rule in our favor and allow our case to proceed, while at the same time allowing the Commission of Inquiry to complete its work.
So the significance of this move, if you could just tell us more about it and what it means not only for the families, but the journey that they've traveled and their legal representatives have journeyed in order for their stories to be heard, and they're struggling to end.
Yeah, you must remember that many of these cases are between 35 and 55 years old. And so that family members have been pursuing justice for a long time, firstly under the apartheid government. And then once the Truth Commission had completed its work, they continued to seek justice for their family members who had in many cases given their lives. So these families already had to endure a lengthy period of some 15, 18 years where no action was being taken by the state. And when the state finally begins to act post-2017, often it's too late. The perpetrators have died or witnesses have died, and seeking any further justice is well nigh impossible. So at that stage, I think the families pivot and they ask for this Commission of Inquiry and the payment of constitutional damages for the harms that have been inflicted. And so it is disappointing that the state, while initially taking their case very seriously, then pivoted towards attempting to delay that justice by postponing the issue and passing it on to the Commission of Inquiry. And the families were very disappointed by that particular move.
And the state's argument is that the facts must be established. But, you know, on the one hand, we are speaking and framing what has happened as Apartheid-era atrocities. So there is an acknowledgement that atrocities have occurred. So just in your understanding, why does the state feel that that legal process will then validate what has happened? Because it's part of our historical archives. We've seen it, we know, we've lived it.
Yes, the dispute isn't about whether the injustices occurred under apartheid. I think everyone accepts that. The question is, once the democratic state had an obligation to investigate and prosecute cases that were not granted amnesty, it did not do so. So our contention is that it's manifestly clear that no investigations or prosecutions happened, and that there was political interference that prevented any such investigation and prosecution. So this is not about whether the original crimes were committed. I think, we are as one on that question. The question is, what did the state do when it had an obligation to pursue prosecutions and investigations of those who were implicated in those crimes? And when they did not do that, that action caused harm to the families, further harm to the families, because they had a reasonable expectation that justice would follow, and they were disappointed in that expectation. The state's argument is that we need to find more details about how this interference happened and who was responsible. And our argument is that we have sufficient information to argue that the harm has occurred and that it was a deliberate action. And while the Commission of Inquiry must get to those further details about who exactly was responsible, that doesn't in fact matter to the families in as far as their quest for constitutional damages is concerned. All they want is an acknowledgement that the harms occurred and the payment of constitutional damages for the state's failure to fulfill its constitutional obligations.
Is there room for a parallel process to occur? And I ask this perhaps out of naivete, but if you could just set me in the right on what would be ideal given, this quagmire.
Yeah, I think we are committed to pursuing what you think of as a parallel process. We need to investigate and understand how political interference occurred. At the same time, where possible, we need to support families in pursuing justice for their cases, to the extent that that is still possible, whether that be through inquests or prosecutions, or in some cases, even private prosecutions. Those resources need to be available so that families can continue their quest for justice. At the same time, we need to understand how that quest was systematically undermined and who was responsible. So I think from our perspective, and certainly from the families, there's no contradiction between these two processes. We must continue the work. At the same time, those who thwarted the quest for justice must be held accountable for their actions.
And I know arguments were made in court which seem to point at the president of the country not wanting to choose where he stands on this matter. Is this the sentiments of the families, that they feel like they're not getting support if compensation is stayed?
Yes, I think the families would like this issue settled. Firstly, because many of them are getting on in years. A delay of a year may not seem like very much to you or me, but someone who's in their 80s or 90s is conceivably not going to be alive to see the end of that process. So they would like this issue settled in terms of constitutional damages. They'd like to see the state admit its liability and make the suitable recompense to allow them to search for justice. Any delay is a serious matter for these families. It's not simply a case of wait for 6 months or 12 months or 18 months and then something will happen. They've put in the hard work, and the legal team has put in the hard work to be able to argue that the matter can be settled now. And that's what our demand is, that the court process proceed. And if the state wants to oppose us on the actual facts of whether harm has been caused, they're free to do so. But they can't abort that process or delay it and say, wait for some other process to end. That's not what we want.
So just to end off, there are people who obviously would understand it or see it from the perspective of the families wanting a monetary reward. But what you are saying, and the families, what you've also just said, is that it's about the healing process. And I'd imagine that there'll be generations who probably would have been born, some who might even pass away without even getting an inkling of that justice against for their loved ones.
Yeah, I think it's important to make the distinction. The families are not asking for any form of personal compensation. They're asking that the money be paid into a fund, and that fund is available to support families in their ongoing quest for justice, and also to make suitable memorialization of their loved one's life and work. But this is not the payment to individuals as compensation. It's constitutional damages, it's compensation to a group, and that those funds will be available not only to the applicants, but to any family that finds itself in similar circumstance.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. Really appreciate it, and wishing you and the families all the best in your pursuit of justice and the journey that they continue to walk, a very difficult one. Zaid Kimmie, Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights, speaking to us about the continuing court battle, the families seeking justice for apartheid-era abuses here in South Africa.